Hello and happy Tuesday, which is of course my book reviews day, and today I would like to talk to you about Baal by Robert McCammon or Robert R. McCammon, depending on which edition you happen to stumble upon. This is my first book review of 2025, so I figured what better book than Robert McCammon's first ever novel. Yeah, this was originally published back in 1978. It is self-described as an angry young man novel written when he was working in a department store. And he was, trying to make a better name for himself. So this novel did fall out of print for several years before being brought back in 2011 by Subterranean Press. The edition that I'm going to showcase here in this video is the deluxe numbered edition from Subterranean Press, featuring the artwork of Tomislav Tikulin. But I will talk more about the edition and more about some other editions of this after I'm done talking about the book itself. And I gotta say, as far as first novels go, this is a pretty strong one. McCammon himself had let this go out of print because I don't want to say he was ashamed of it, but he felt that his early novels weren't a good representation of his work. But he was convinced to bring them back in print after he went back, reread them, and realized they weren't as bad as he thought. And I mean, really, that's the perfect way to describe it. Not as bad as you would think. Probably not the best way to recommend a novel, I know. But McCammon is one of my favorite authors, and the man writes masterpiece after masterpiece. But that being said, Baal is not quite a masterpiece. It's very much an author's first novel, but you can definitely see the potential there. There is some very strong writing, very strong potential within Baal, even though it might get lost amongst, the freshman-style writing that you're going to find within the novel. The time jumps that kind of hurt it to a degree. The titular Baal, Jeffrey Harper Rains, although he prefers to be known by Baal, is essentially the Antichrist. He is, think you're Rosemary's Baby, your omen. He has been born out of this world, born out of a pretty brutal rape that occurs at the start of this novel to bring about the end of days, to bring about chaos and sow chaos within society. As I mentioned, it does start with a pretty horrible rape right at the start of the novel to young Mary Kate, and you are soon introduced to Mary Kate and Joe, her husband, as they soon discover that in the aftermath of this rape, she was left with fiery handprints burned into her skin. And she soon realizes that she's pregnant. But this is not going to be your Rosemary's Baby ripoff, because it quickly jumps straight from, yes, I'm going to keep this baby, to bam, baby's already born. And you only spend a very brief few chapters with the family and with the baby, who will soon be known as Baal, before you do a quick time jump to Baal in an orphanage. And man, I'm not going to lie, these orphanage chapters are probably the best chapters in the novel, in my opinion. They are downright creepy. It is where Baal is kind of getting his own disciples. He's getting his own following while also tormenting and dealing with the sisters and priests of the orphanage. If you were a fan of Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi, then you are going to be a fan of these chapters in particular. And that's not to say that, one is inspired by the other. This definitely predates Boys in the Valley by 40 some years, but man, they definitely tap a great vein of kind of young adolescent horror within those chapters. Then all of a sudden, less than 100 pages in the novel, you suddenly have a time jump, or 100 pages in this particular edition, time jump into the future, where you actually meet our protagonist. Actually, you don't even meet the protagonist for a few chapters into part 2. But eventually you're going to meet Virga. He is a theological professor who is going to Kuwait to seek out his friend. Now, you, the reader, will already know what happened to the friend from the first 2 chapters of Part 2. But here in Kuwait is where a now adult Baal is starting to sow the seeds of chaos within society. He is starting to flex his abilities. He is bringing violence and orgies to the street of Kuwait. He is inserting that religious terror and almost religious wars between factions within Kuwait. And these chapters are also pretty enjoyable. I mean, these actually kind of reminded me of The Exorcist, which is kind of strange because, The Exorcist is very much following a small child. But you get those early chapters of The Exorcist where Marin is kind of dealing with Pazuzu out in the Middle East. And I kind of imagine almost an atmosphere inspired by that within Baal. But then, 100 pages later, bam, you're in part 3. Unfortunately, part 3, I'm not going to get into too many details. Part 3 is, I feel, the weakest portion of the novel, which is a hunt for Baal that takes them up through the Arctic Circle, where you have Verga and several other main characters kind of searching for Baal to kind of put an end to things. And I'm not going to get into too many details there, but it's an enjoyable read. Unfortunately, I did feel the final third, the final part, was probably the weakest of the other ones. Not to say that there's no action in it. I mean, the last 2 chapters in particular have quite a good turn of events, quite a good use of action. But leading up to that, I felt it was a little more dry and slower than the first 2 parts, especially after having this roller coaster speed part 1, where you are almost getting whiplash of bam, rape, bam, instant pregnancy, baby suddenly born. Then you have some little bit of terror with the baby as an infant. Flash forward to the baby in the orphanage. Well, not really a baby at that point, but a young boy in the orphanage causing chaos within there. I feel definitely part 1 is the strong part. It almost seems like McCammon wanted to write an epic with Baal here. And I feel like if he were to go back and rewrite it or to revisit it, it would be fascinating to see what he could bring to it. Adding more depth and more time with the characters in the novel could be beneficial as on the whole. I mean, you actually learn quite a bit about Joe and Mary Kate, and Joe in particular, and what his wants and needs and goals are, which, it kind of seems like you're going to build him up to be a main character, but he's not even in the novel for 50 pages before you're, flash forwarding to Baal in the orphanage. So it's kind of, uneasy in that way. It's unsteady, where it's kind of putting focus on characters who aren't going to be central to the plot. Whereas I feel like Verga didn't quite get as much characterization as the other characters. He didn't have as much depth. He's more of the everyman in the novel. He almost felt like a Bentley Little character, although this was written, a decade before Bentley Little even came onto the scene. Curious enough, I mean, because there's going to be lots of comparisons out there to Rosemary's Baby or The Omen or The Exorcist, or as I mentioned with The Orphanage, comparisons to Boys in the Valley. Another one comparison I do want to make involves Zark. He's a shaman character who assists Michael and Verga with their search for Baal in the final act, part 3. Almost reminded me in a way of Quint from Jaws. I mean, the characters themselves aren't exactly the same. Quint is, a rough and gruff character wanting to kill the shark for money. Zark is a reluctant hero who is hired to help Verga and Michael navigate the Arctic Circle, who reluctantly is helping them on their journey. But having that more like grizzled veteran who knows the environment and knows the way definitely kind of gave me Quint vibes, especially with storytelling around the fire in this versus storytelling around a bottle of whiskey in Jaws. It's just another little comparison I thought I would put there. But man, McCammon definitely showed promise within Baal. I mean, if you like McCammon's novels, then you should definitely check out Baal if you can get a copy, because it's one of those first novels that's interesting to read. You don't feel like you're wasting your time. It's a very quick read despite being 300 pages. Like I said, it might be too quick for its own good. It probably could have benefited from being a longer novel to dedicate more to the characters or to be, more fleshed out. But as McCammon says in his own afterword, this was his angry young man novel, kind of dealing with, the power struggle of, it's about power, written at a time when I had none. It's perfectly describing how he wrote Baal. This afterword, by the way, is not exclusive to Subterranean Press. This was one he actually wrote in, I believe, 88. Yes, 88, so it would have been 10 years after Baal was published on one of the other paperback editions. If you are here in the UK, I believe, and Hunter can correct me if I'm wrong, that the only hardcover edition in the US is the Subterranean Press edition. It was published in 3 states, this right here being the deluxe signed edition, which came with a slipcase, and this dust jacket artwork, if I can speak English, by Tomislav Tikulin. The more accessible edition was a 1,000 copy signed edition bound in cloth. This is bound in leather. Both are, of course, signed, and I believe the 1,000 copy is numbered as well, or maybe it was just signed without a number. There's also a 52 copy lettered edition, which I believe is also bound in leather. I believe it still has the same Tikulin artwork for the cover, hence it listing both on the inside dust flaps, but that one should have a tray case as opposed to the slipcase. Interesting enough, the 1,000 copy actually does have a different dust jacket. It actually features Baal with kind of a demonic chest piece. Personally, I think I actually kind of prefer that artwork to this one, although I might be a little biased just because I want to have as much unique artwork as I can. And what I mean by that is that this artwork by Tikulin was actually reused a few years later for Dark Places, Evil Faces, which was a charity anthology that PS Publishing did, compiled by Mark Lumby, like I said, several years back. Now, this really has nothing to do with Baal or McCammon in any way. I just thought it was interesting that, you have the same artwork used again. Kind of funny, because this is actually this might be the second McCammon title I've reviewed in a row that had artwork used elsewhere. Late last year, I did a review of The Five by McCammon, which had an interior piece by Vincent Chong reused for one of the magazines that SST Publications had done years back. So I say in the US, this is the first hardcover edition. There was a hardcover edition published in the UK, I believe, back in the 80s. That you can also find as well. I actually think that might be the rarest of the editions out there. But you're more likely to find a nice, cheap paperback edition. There have been several paperback editions over the years, including this guy, which I figured I'd showcase here. This, my friends, is, I believe, the first edition. It came with the wrappers in a nice little plastic dust cover there, which is why you're seeing the reflection on it. This is the Avon paperback, back for a price of $2.25 back in 1978. Now, I don't know if the pages were red or if that's just, some crazy discoloring over the years. But I thought, hey, it'd be pretty interesting to showcase this one for you guys. And, of course, it is signed by Robert R. McCammon, the R being Rick, his middle name, which he did use within his publications up until his brief retirement for the mid to late 90s, the first few years of the 2000s. Then he came back into the scene, dropped the R. But anyways, yeah, I thought that'd be cool to show you. It's been done many times over the years in paperback, from Avon onward. I think the most iconic, in my opinion, and I should have done my research, but it's a pocket, I believe it's a Pocket Books edition, where they had done quite a few McCammon titles, and all of them had kind of like angular text, with almost kind of like a horizon style painting on the cover. Baal, I believe, is kind of like almost like the sun setting with like an evil face in the sun, if I can describe that properly. But it was done almost in sequence with Swan Song had a cover like that. I believe Nightboat did. Mystery Walk did not, or maybe it did. The Mystery Walk, I think, did have that. It had. Then also Wolf's Hour. There's a whole series of his books back in the 80s that had similar covers. But I'm just rambling now. Anyways, McCammon is a god out there amongst authors. I mean, the man writes classic after classic. And although Baal might not live up to the level that he has come to know as an author, it's definitely worth checking out just to see what the author could be. It's the... to see like that fledgling author, the man working in the department store, his Angry Young Man novel, and you can see the potential within. So yeah, that's Baal by Robert McCammon. It's still a very enjoyable read, a very quick read, even if, it might be a little lopsided between parts 1 and 2 and then parts 3, in my opinion. So anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. You should be able to pick up copies of Baal. I don't know. Actually, I would say most easily in paperback. It might not be an Avon paperback like this, but I mean, the hardcover is since sold out. I don't believe the 1,000 copy edition should be too expensive on the secondary market, but you'll have to, take a look if you want a copy for yourself. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. Please consider subscribing to the channel. I do at least one book review like this a week, as well as plenty of unboxing videos in between here and there for you to check out. So thank you guys very much for watching. Please check out Robert McCammon, and we'll see you around next time.